Okay, so yeah, welcome to this deep dive on settlement. I'll just give you a quick overview of today's session. So this is part of the design playback session, and this is the deep dive, which can go to a much lower level depending on what information it is that you're interested in. We're expecting it to take between 60 and 90 minutes. And I'll talk about the scope of the session on settlement in a minute, but we'll talk about the new services and the timelines and some of the interfaces and reports. So I guess the outcome that we're looking for is to give you a better understanding of of settlement as it relates to the design, and it also gives you the opportunity to ask questions. And on that, if you want to ask a question, you need to go to slido.com and use on the bottom of the screen there, you'll see it's hashtag MHHS settlement, and that will allow you to submit your questions. We'll stop at the end of each section and see what questions that we've received, and try and answer those. Then, if we can't answer any, we will take them away, and we'll provide all the questions and answers after the session, and including we will also share this slide pack. So, quick overview of this session's content. So we'll do a quick recap of the market-wide half-hourly settlement target operating model, with an overview of those standing services. That will then talk about the new industry standing data, and then we'll go through the various services. So that's the market-wide data service, the load shaping service, the volume allocation service, before going on to talk about the interfaces, both incoming and outgoing, and a little bit on the revised reporting requirements, and then just a bit at the end on the operational choreography. So a quick overview of the Elexon Central Services. So today we are looking at the services in this red box here. So here we're calling them BSC Central Settlement Services, and these services are provided by Elexon. These services will be receiving the half-hourly data from the three market segments. That's the smart market segment, the advanced market segment, and the immediate supply segment from the relevant data services for those segments. And the reason this is highlighted in the teal box is because these services, like I said, are being provided by Elexon. So I'm not going to put any more detail on this because we'll be talking about all of these separately as we go through. Amity, has anybody submitted any questions yet on this, or should I just carry on?
So we had a few questions in advance. So do you want to take some of those now?
Okay. Yes, if they relate to BSC Central Services, because I noticed some of the pre-submitted ones seem to relate to the advanced segment, and that's sessions this afternoon.
I'm just taking a look now. Okay, well, perhaps if you make a start, and then as we go, we can pick some of them up.
Okay, Amity. So industry standing data. Industry standing data is the revised standing data that will replace what's currently known as the market domain data. A lot of the existing market domain data relates to non-half-hourly processes, and they will be going, and we will be not bringing those forward into the industry standing data. However, we will be keeping that data visible, sort of frozen and visible for at least 5 years from the end of transition, from the start of transition, sorry. The new and amended ISD entities, so that's amended NDD entities, are set out in this artifact. It's called MHHS PEDI 021. And so that's entity data items is what the EDI stands for, not to be confused with that acronym being used elsewhere in the industry. So on that, I will just open that up and show you what that looks like. He says. Can everybody see that?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the version that we published, which is 3.0. You can see in the contents here the list of the amended existing entities, and then there is this set of new entities here. Please note that the master timetable will be one of these entities. So looking through that, some of these haven't actually needed to be amended. I guess some of the key changes that you might want to note is we go to the GEOS tariff ID. So this entity is currently called line loss factor class ID. And we're replacing line loss factor class ID with GEOS tariff ID because effectively that is what it's mainly used for. However, it's also used to identify the line loss factors that need to be applied in settlement calculations. However, we're introducing a new data item called line loss factor ID to replace that, to split those two uses. Which will allow us to hugely reduce the size of the files related to the line loss factors. So I think that's all I was going to say. This is where to find it. We will have new stuff in here potentially on routing data for the data integration platform. We haven't quite landed on what that looks like. And there are a few other things at the end here, if I can get to the end. We may also have this. What we might also include is something to identify load managed area clock intervals to ensure that the metering systems in load managed areas have their storage and immersion heating systems only configured at certain times. That is still up in the air for discussion, and there's also ongoing discussions about the retention of things like SSCs and TPRs and the associated clock intervals for that. I'll stop sharing that one. Go back to the slide deck. Okay, Amity, were there any questions on industry standing data, or should I carry on?
Yes, we've had one come in. Question: how? Oh, sorry, hold on a second. Actually, I didn't think we've had any on that just yet. There's a question. Will the questions asked in advance of the session? Oh, sorry, that's about today. I don't think we've had any on that so far.
Okay, I'll carry on. So moving on to the first service we're going to talk about, that's the market-wide data service. And this is the service which aggregates the consumption and export data that's coming in from the data services. It aggregates that by a number of different ways. I guess the main one for the imbalance settlement calculation is adding stuff up by balancing mechanism unit. There it will also apply the losses. So that will apply those line loss factors to those individual consumptions and aggregate those as well. It will also aggregate stuff by that GEOS tariff ID for GEOS tariff reporting. And it will also aggregate across the balancing mechanism units for each supplier within a GSP group and distribution region. So there are 5 entities there. Understanding the entities, if it says BP, that is the business process diagram. If it's BRS, that is the requirements associated with that. If it says METH, then that is the method statements, and that sets out the details of the calculations. And if it's BPD, that is the business process description. So each step in the business process diagram should have a matching step in the business process descriptions. Additionally, there is this other methodology statement for demand disconnection events, and that contains that sort of split across the MDS methods and the volume allocation service methods, because both of those services need to undertake calculation in the event of a demand disconnection event. I'll just quickly share the business process diagram for that. And can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the business process diagram. You will see that within these diagrams there are swim lanes. So this is the swim lane for the market wide data service. There are swim lanes for the load shaping service. At the top here, we've got the data integration platform, and this is where the data will be coming in from the various publishers from the data service into the market-wide data service. So on this, you can see the market-wide data service receiving the half-hourly data. It will validate that data, and if it fails validation, there is an interface which is called the IF014, which reports anything that fails validations. In the method statement, there is the detail of those validations that are expected. In undertaking those validations, it is also using the registrations data associated with each metering point. So it can match up the metering point data and the associated registration data for the UTC date, which is being processed. If everything passes validation, if everything passes validation, then it goes on down into the calculations. There are some defaulting processes, so if there is data missing, then we need to apply defaults. Once all of that has happened, we allocate that data to the various balancing mechanism units, and if there are any additional balancing mechanism units, it will also do that allocation as well. Once it's done that, it will do the loss calculation, and it can aggregate up all of the loss data. It is also using various bits of information elsewhere, such as that industry standing data that we've got. there's also processes to deal with disputes within that. Once the calculation's made, there's then some further validation checks, and all of this process here is what to do to resolve any issues that have come out from the calculation, including potentially going back to BSC code to find out what the next steps should be, and investigating issues. But if everything's okay, then there is a list of reports that will come out from the market-wide data process that will be published onto the data integration platform, and that data can be consumed by any parties who have subscribed and are allowed to access that data. So I think that's everything I was going to say on the market-wide data service. Amity, if we had any questions on the market-wide data service or on anything else?
Sure. So we've got a question here on MDD. So it says, why freeze for only 5 years if there is a potential that it's needed longer?
I think the view was 5 years is plenty of time for people to sort out other solutions for legacy data. That was our view of a timescale that should be sufficient. I guess if we got to that 5-year period which was the sort of drop dead time, and there was clearly still a requirement to retain it, then it's seeing as it's frozen, there's no reason for not allowing it to stay for longer.
Thanks. There's another question. This was submitted in advance, so I don't know whether this has been covered already or will be covered, but how will settlements performance be calculated in the world of MHHS, and which party will be ultimately responsible for calculating it?
Yeah, so I think this is interesting. So when data is now being submitted, it will have various flags which not only say is the data actual data or if it's estimated. It will also give an indication of why it's been estimated, because there are two items that help you do that. There's an estimation reason code, and there's also the method of estimation that you've used, and that could have like an E1 flag, an E2 flag, and each of those means are different things. So because all the data will be held in Elexon Central Systems, then they should be able to look directly into that data to understand the picture, certainly in terms of actuals and estimates. It should be able to establish some performance requirements around that, depending on the settlement risks that arise. So they've got this flexible structure now, and as they identify risks, then the performance assurance structure will allow those risks to be managed going forward.
Thank you. We've got another question, which is, what visibility will we get of exceptions which may occur, such as failed D10s on legacy meters or unexpected consumption spikes?
There will be exception reports. That doesn't really tend to relate to this central system, so I think we might be out part of that for one of the other sessions, because that D10s are potentially being passed on change of supplier, and that would relate to the data services rather than the central services are not receiving any D10s at all. So it's only receiving half-hourly data, because it is what it says on the tin, market-wide half-hourly settlement.
Great, thanks. We've got from start of transition, VAS will need to ingest new world data from SDS and old world data from data aggregators at the same time. It says maps don't show this? Question mark.
Yes, these maps do not cover transition at the moment. The statement that was made there is perfectly true. When the volume allocation services performs calculations during the migration period, it will be receiving files from the existing half-hourly data aggregators and non-half-hourly data aggregators. It will need to undertake those calculations plus the calculations on the data from the market-wide data service, and that data is structured in the same way. So the data from a market-wide data service going to VAS will look to Lexon Central Systems very much like it has come from a half-hourly data aggregator during that period, and so it can add up across all those BM units, old world and new, and then perform the correction, which I'll talk about in a little bit.
Great, just checking, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Great, thanks. The next question that we've got is business process 16, consumption amendment doesn't have the option to amend annualized consumptions. Why is this missing?
Business process 16, without having a look at that, but just the question seems a bit odd because it refers to annualized consumptions. And obviously annualized advances are going. However, we will be calculating some annual consumptions to replace the EAC. There is a method statement out there which shows how we're intending to do that.
Great, thank you. And then how will all this data be, this was, sorry, sent in advance. So how will all this data be collated and used to calculate settlements performance? What happens if a particular SDS fails to provide the required data?
Yeah, I just refer you there to my previous answer that you know, analytics on the submitted data should be able to provide that level of insight.
Great, I'm just conscious of time. We do have a few other questions. I don't know whether you want to carry on and then we can come back to that.
Yeah, let's move on to the load shaping service now then. So this is this.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to come back on that. I did put my hand up. It's Anna Miller from Alexon. Just on the settlement performance points. I think overall you're right in terms of the risk approach, but there are a number of requirements on settlement performance that are hardwired into the code. And we're sort of having discussions with the programme at the moment in terms of how we'll manage that for market wide.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for that input.
Thank you.
Great. And we've
Hi,
got
sorry to bother again. Please, can you confirm the hashtag we should be using on Slido?
So I didn't hear that.
Can you confirm the hashtag we should be using on Slido?
It's MHHS and then settlement. So you need two S's. So that might be where you're going wrong.
Thanks.
And then I see Chris, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, it was the same point. I couldn't get into Slido. I missed the last S.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Kevin.
Okay, moving on to the load shaping service. So load shaping is the process under market-wide half-hourly settlement that is effectively replacing the profiling arrangements. It's the data that you use if you can't get hold of the actual half-hourly data, and it allows you to divide other consumptions up, such as meter advances or daily consumptions retrieved from the meter into half-hourly periods. So that allows the data service to do that, but in order to calculate that, we need to process the actual half-hourly data according to a number of categories called load shaping categories, which will be set out in that industry standing data. And that data will be published to the data services for use in those calculations. So the business process diagram is BPO 18. The associated descriptions is BPD 18. The load shaping service requirements are in BRS 07, and the actual detail of the calculations is set out in METH 005 there. I'll quickly flash up the load shaping service business process diagram. Hoping everybody can see that. Amity, can you see that?
Yeah, I can. That's come up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So this whole section here, you'll see this in both the NDS and the LSS. So logically, they're doing the same thing. In reality, I think this will only actually occur once. This validation of the half-hourly data. I guess the difference for the load shaping calculations is that they're only selecting actual data, so it's got to be validated actual data in order to go into the load shaping calculations. It does not use any estimated data in the production of the load shapes. It will need the industry standing data, which defines the categories for the calculations, and it will need that registration data as well, so that it can understand for each metering system which load shape category that metering system falls within. That will go into the calculation, and on a daily basis for a given UTC date, it will perform the calculations. If there are insufficient metering systems, currently we're saying less than 50, then within a GSP group, maybe it will perform a default calculation using wider data. So it might calculate a national load shape if there are too few metering systems with actual data. It calculates the load shapes in order to perform processes. It also needs to calculate some load shape totals. So it will calculate a daily total, peak and off peak totals, and it also calculates some rolling daily totals as well for use in the calculations. Once that's calculated, there will be some validation checks to check that's okay and investigate any issues. Once any issues have been resolved, that data will get stored, and once everything's okay, that then gets published onto the data integration platform using these two interfaces. Interface 22, which is the load shapes by period, and 23, which is those totals which I just mentioned. Are there any questions on the load shaping service?
I'm not sure whether we've got any on the load shaping service itself. We do have. We've got what load shapes are there for E7/E10? A lack of multi-rate load shapes will be of significant detriment to customers.
So for trad meters that are E7 and E10, there is a calculation which allows you to allocate the off-peak energy to a night period, depending on what the most common switch regime is within those GSP groups. I guess one thing that we're currently looking at is the potential impact for smart opted out customers that don't have that option, because we haven't got the ability to collect the data from those time of use registers, and it would just put the total consumption under the single load shape. So we're having a look to see if there's something that we can do to resolve that. But I think it's worth saying that we have noted that is a potential issue.
Great. We've got another question here, which is, are the objects and domain in ISD aligned with MDD?
Just say it again, Amity.
Objects and domains in ISD aligned with MDD?
Where they're common tables, the structure is largely the same, bar any amendments that have been required. The structures will be similar. There'll be similar validation required, and I guess the only thing that's slightly different is the publishing mechanism. We'll publish them to a hosting platform, and we'll send a notification out via the data integration platform to let people know where, if it's public access wanted. If not, you can just subscribe to the IF 22 and 23 and get it direct.
Great, thanks. We've got another question, potentially from earlier, which is, given the current MHHS settlement will need to continue during transition, how will GSP group correction factors be calculated?
So yeah, I was going to come on to that, but I can cover that off now. So if it's backwards looking, i.e. the new GCF calculation hasn't gone live, then it'll just use the existing calculation and it won't be using any MHHS data for that. Once we go live, there will be a new calculation. Instead of having one GSP group correction factor, there will be two, one for import and one for export, and that calculation is set out in the volume allocation service method statement, which we will come on to volume allocation in a bit. It will use that rather than the old one, but it will be using, for old world, it will be using the market domain data consumption component classes with some updated scaling weights, because the scaling weights currently are 0 for export, and we need to amend that to such that things are being calculated on a like-for-like basis, and the calculation will also then use some new consumption component classes set out in the industry standing data, together with their scaling weights, which are also set out in one of those new tables in the industry standing data.
Thanks. We've then got, will DS be obliged to perform estimation for the II run, given that the LS may not be available in time for the II?
We'll come on to that. It's covered off in the operational choreography. Obviously, there's only very limited time to submit estimates ahead of the II run, but load shapes will be available for defaulting ahead of that.
Brilliant. A couple more, but perhaps if we make some progress and then we can come back.
Okay, so I might have already covered some of this off now. So the volume allocation service is the service under market-wide half-hourly settlement that will be replacing the supplier volume allocation agent service, which the SVAA, as it's currently known. It will, during transition, obviously be getting a feed of data from the SVAA calculations, and the SVAA will be continuing to produce things like daily profile coefficients throughout the migration until there's no longer a requirement, because all the metering systems have been migrated. So as we've already just talked about, it's the volume allocation service will allocate the data to calculated by the market-wide data service, which will already be coming in by balancing mechanism units, but that data will be uncorrected. It will also have the losses data calculated from by the market-wide data service, and it will perform that GSP group correction, which I just talked you through there. Under this, the business process diagram is BP20. The steps in that are reflected in the business process description 20, and then there are the two method statements, the volume allocation service method statement, which sets out the calculations that need to be undertaken by the volume allocation service. And I can just see a mistake here. This is supposed to be the DDE method statement, which we had here. Not here. This should be METH 08 DDE method statement. I'll correct that. But as I said earlier, the volume allocation service still will need to perform some calculations to correct data in the event of a demand disconnection event. Quickly flash up the business process diagram for volume allocation service. There we go. Okay, so this is the business process diagram for the volume allocation service. Sorry, I'm just assuming everybody can see that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So again, we've got the swim lanes. We've got the data coming in from the market-wide data service at the top here. So it needs to access that data. It also needs to access the industry standing data to interpret a number of items, including like balancing mechanism units for reporting purposes. It needs to understand from the industry standing data the date for the settlement date for which it is performing its runs. And it also needs to get data from the central data collection agent. So in order to undertake the GSP group correction calculation, it needs to know what the GSP group take is. And the GSP group take is calculated by the central data collection agent using metering data from grid supply points and some rules, aggregation rules to calculate the GSP group take, which is basically saying for any settlement period or for any half hour, this was the net volume entering the GSP group. So all of that data goes in, and then the volume allocation service will start doing the calculations for each of those balancing mechanism units. It will then calculate the GSP group correction factors, as I've mentioned, that will be for import and for export. And once it's done that, it will have a corrected data. It will have the BM unit allocated demand volume, which goes on into the imbalance settlement calculations. It will also calculates supplier deemed take for reporting to suppliers, which is basically aggregating over the BM units within the GSP group. It also needs to calculate some storage volumes for National Grid, which go out on the reporting to National Grid. Likewise, all the outputs are validated before they go on to be published. However, once the any investigation has been undertaken and the validation has passed, then the volume allocation service will publish a number of reports which we've listed here, but I will come on to those later on. Amity, are there any questions on the volume allocation service?
I don't think there are more questions on that. We've got a question about whether or not we'll share the questions after this event, which we will. That will come from us, but yeah, none of that. So perhaps if we move on and we can take them nearer the end.
Okay, moving on. So we're moving on to the interfaces now. The interfaces are set out in this document here, which is DES 138, which is the interface catalogue. You'll see within that it looks like a spreadsheet, and within each of those there is a tab for the different interfaces. And these are the not an exhaustive list, because there's exception reports and things as well, but the main outgoing ones here are going out from Electron Central Systems are the 22 and the 23, which is the load shaping ones that I already talked about. There's the interface IF013, which notifies back to data services and potentially suppliers where defaulting has been applied. There's that IF14, which I believe already mentioned, which is any rejected consumption data, followed those validation checks on ingestion of the data into Electron Central Systems. And then there's this one at the bottom. This is the interface 47, and this so when ISD is published, it will be put onto a hosting platform, and parties will be sent this notification to say that there's new data there, and it will and that data can then be downloaded by the parties that require that data. This is a list of the incoming data. I think this has got two flavors. It's got, if we look at IF21, that is all the consumption data per settlement period coming in from the data services. I think most of all of the other ones on here are in fact different flavors of registration data when registration data has changed. So it's got the IF01, which is notification of the change of supplier. A18, which is any changes to other data items within in registration data. Then there's some specific ones like changes to the connection type. I probably missed it off here. There should be one relating to change of energization status as well, which I can't see. There are a few other bits in here. In fact, it's probably in one of these, but if the domestic indicator changed from true to false, i.e. it is now non-domestic, it get a note update from that. Some of these other data items that it will receive, it doesn't actually need to know what the consent granularity is for an MPAN, because that will have already been used upstream by the data services, and whether it's got an in-home display or not is irrelevant to Electron Central Systems. Just stop there. Amity, are there any questions on any of the interfaces?
There's a question on volume allocation. So is there any interaction between MHHS and the calculations for VLPs or calculation of ABSVD?
Yes, there are interactions, but these will be covered off elsewhere. It is on the radar. I think the key difference is data, for some of these calculations where they were coming in, where the data was coming in from half-hourly data aggregators, now might be coming in from ADSs, and the data will also be coming in from VLPs for behind the meter, but that is all being taken account of. But this session is focusing on settlement rather than the other services, but that doesn't mean that they've been forgotten.
Great, thank you. And on choreography, with the shorter time scale to the SF run, is there any ongoing justification, purpose or benefit for the II run?
This has come up a few times. If I sort of hark back to the code change and development group days, or even before that, the DWG, it was always felt that the II run was really there as a check for those big metering systems, that GSP group metering and any transmission connected stuff that might have data errors, to be corrected prior to an SF run. So an II run, let's be clear about this, no money changes hands. That's why it's called an interim information run. It is purely run for information, and that information potentially allows you to trap any big errors in the CVA market rather than the SVA market. So I think it's been felt that it's safe to keep it.
Great, a couple more, but we can pick up them later.
Okay, just on Elexon Central Systems reporting. The reports are in this artifact ER011B, and this is one flavour of reports. These are the external reports. So these are reports going from Elexon Central Systems out to parties over, and these ones are the ones that are key DIP reports. So this means these reports are going out over the data integration platform. So there are a number of reports for use of system, DUOS reports. We've got one that sort of models the current information for half-hourly on the D30, which is this aggregated data report. There's another flavour of that, which is for embedded networks, which is the 120. And the LDSO report contains data for all the suppliers within its distribution region. Then the 125 is the flavour of that report for a supplier, which only contains data relating to that supplier. There is the report which reports all of those allocated demand volumes that been both corrected and uncorrected by the volume allocation service. There's that supplier deemed take report, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the report which sums across the BM units within the distribution region where a supplier has got more than one BM unit for that distribution region. And there's also a report that comes out from the market-wide data service, which reports the uncorrected volumes, and that's the 175. So that's the outgoing reports. You'll also see that there are some amended DTN reports. So we've got versions of the D81, the D296, the supply header report, the D266. and some of these are modestly amended due to changes for market-wide half-hourly settlement. There's a number of reports which are versions of existing reports that relate to demand disconnection events. So that's 69774 is all relating to demand disconnection events, and likewise with the D373 there. So they're external reports, but they're going over the DTN rather than the data integration platform. So there's also this document here, which is the EROI 11A. Now these are the Elexon internal reports, and this is basically going from one Elexon system to another. We specified the data item in those reports, but not the mechanism. That's within the gift of the Helix program, which Elexon's running, as to how those data items get from one service to another. But there's, if you just scan through that, there's data going for EMRS, for capacity and contract for different calculations. It's got the outturn calculated data that's been corrected going from the volume allocation service to the settlements administration agent for the imbalance settlement calculations. It will be passing the group correction factors for import and export for Elexon so that they can publish those similar to the way they do now on the Elexon portal. There's an internal report which looks at if there's any dubious data back to the MDS before a volume allocation run is undertaken, and that goes from the volume allocation run to MDS. MDS needs to then go back and confirm whether there's a problem with the data or not, or provide corrected data. There's an exception report to the central data collection agent. So when it receives that group take data, the volume allocation service also undertakes validation on that data before it would use it in a run. There is the 165, which is the report which goes to the electricity systems operator. This isn't quite fleshed out yet. The design team are in discussion with the ESO to try and nail down the contents of that report, especially given some changes in the tenuous charging arrangements. So that one, if you look at that, isn't quite good to go yet. And then we've got at the bottom there, we've got that 180. This is the data coming from market-wide data service to the volume allocation service, and that's that uncorrected data that they've calculated for each consumption component class for each balancing mechanism unit and the associated losses. And these are similar, but rather than being these new reports, these are ones where there are existing what we call P flows. So all of these are prefixed with a P. You will see versions of these in the existing SVA data catalogues, and again they've been amended. P, if you're interested, stands for paper. Obviously, it's not paper in reality, but that's what the P historically stood for. And these P flows will be going to various people, either BSC panel, suppliers, settlements administration agent. And I think that was it on both interfaces and reports. Amity, are there any questions on any of that?
We've got IF 150 and others do not appear on the current interface catalogue. Are the ECS interfaces held elsewhere?
IF 150.
That's right, yeah.
So these are reports, and these are in. You will find these in this artifact here. is the reports. What? Just repeat the question in case I missed a nuance of it.
IF 150 and others do not appear on the current interface catalog. So the question is, are the ECS interfaces held elsewhere?
So yeah, so I think I just answered that. Yes, these interfaces are set out in this artifact here, which is the ECS reports external. Okay, any more, Amity?
We've got a question. What's the difference between IF 115 and IF 120? They look the same.
Yes, I did mention this as I went through. The 120 is for embedded networks, where 115 is just for the it is data that's sort of similar to the B30 data with aggregated consumptions.
Great. I think we can come back to some of the others later.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm having a problem with Slido. It's Graham Wilcox here from Indico. It's unclear to me to where the SAA IO14 and the P287s are going to be replaced.
There will be amendments to the IO 14. Obviously, that doesn't come out of any of these services. That it by definition, because it says SAA, that is further downstream. It will need amendment due to changes to the settlement timetable, and that will be a consequential change that will be implemented. I wasn't sure what the other flow was. Can you just say it again?
Sorry, the P287, it's the VLP adjustment data that Alexon had to the 14. It doesn't work now anyway, but we still need to sort of get it.
Yeah, that will stay.
Same thing.
If it's anything to do with the VLPs, that will just persist, but that's not an imbalanced settlement calculation. It's for wider access. So
thank you.
Okay. Okay, I just got a shouty man outside my window. 2 seconds. Okay, we'll just move on to operational choreography. So the operational choreography can be found in this document here, OC001 operational choreography version 1.0. This is the document that sets out the timing for the various settlement processes. It also sets out some SLAs for data surfaces, and sort of is cognizant of the constraints that are being driven by both the settlement timetable and the requirements to get the half-hourly consumption data in ahead of aggregation for each of the settlement runs. As I pointed out earlier, the actual timings of all the runs, from load shaping, the MDS run, the II runs, all of that will be set out in that master settlement timetable, which is part of the industry standing data, and the structure of that table can be seen in that document that I showed to you earlier. If you look in that document, you will see diagrams such as this. It has D here, which is the sort of drop dead date by which we're expecting consumption to have been submitted by the data services. The unmetered supplies data service will publish its data as soon as it's calculated. That's normally on D+1. The load shaping run will occur ahead of the II run, and there will be an MDS run, and that should allow you to plug any of the gaps. estimates can be fed into that, but like you say, there's a very, very limited time scale to do that. So we're not expecting a lot of estimated data to actually make it in the II run. I think if there's no actual data, that it's likely that that data will be defaulted. The details of that are in there. I don't think I'll go through all of that. You can go and look at that yourself. But I think the the key things on the timing is that the SF run it will be on working day +7. There'll be another run at about 30 working days. 30 working days, which will be like the R1 run. The existing runs R2 and R3 will disappear, and the final settlement run or the final reconciliation run RF will occur at 4 months. Amity, have we got any further questions?
Not since we discussed earlier, so we can pick up some of the other ones at the end.
Okay, so that was the end. So Amity, is there anything else that we need to pick up now?
Sure. So, yeah, there are a couple here. So on MDS, it says currently the DA issues D95s. Will there be an equivalent for MDS?
No, I mean the D95 is an exception report for non-half hourly metering systems, and it contains lots of information. Sort of, is it the right party appointed? Is there a missing AA or an EAC? It is very much an exception report, which allows a supplier to correct any data or identify missing data and get its agents to submit that data prior to settlement run. The MDS will be reporting data that's missing when it undertakes its run. It will be defaulting that data, but that notification of missing data will allow data services to collect that data or estimate that data ahead of the following reconciliation run.
Okay. I'm not sure whether this one is for this session or another one, but I'll just ask anyway. If energization change is in flight and a change of agent is also in flight, what happens to the energization change request? Is it queued?
That sounds like a technical issue, so it's probably not for this session. But as I noted, when we looked at those inbound flows, any confirmed changes will flow through to Elexon Central System, so they will know at any point if when confirmed energization status, what the energization status is for any particular MPAN and settlement period. I guess there's a couple of wrinkles around that. If it has received actual data on the de-energized site, that data will not get rejected. That data will be processed on the assumed that you couldn't collect actual data from an de-energized site, which would sort of suggest that the energized status had been incorrectly set. But if it received estimated data on an de-energized site, then that data would be rejected, and there's an exception report which will state that.
Great. What role will the DC play in data validation in MHHS?
When you say DC, the DCs are going, they're replaced by data services. So there are smart data services, advanced data services, and unmetered supplies data service. Those data services have their own validation requirements, which are set out in their method statements. Yeah, I would urge you to go and look at those method statements if you need to understand what validation has been undertaken. But at high level, they will check for zeros, negatives. They will check against mass maximum permissible volumes, and they will do some reconciliation checks as well.
Where a DS requires historic consumption data for estimation, will the MDS provide it via the DIP to a new DS? Currently, it appears to be coming direct from the DIP.
I'll have to take that one away. I'm not sure that we are passing historic data, but that just might be my memory.
What will the lowest level of the supplier settlement invoice be post MHHS implementation? Will it be at MPAN level or another level?
No, it still would be at trading party.
Where a DS requires, oh no, we've had that one. II run is used for supplier credit cover, so it says not true that money changes hands. The accuracy of II has a direct impact on supplier cash flow. I guess that's more of a comment, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I said money doesn't change hands, it doesn't change hands with regard to an imbalance settlement calculation, but it might require suppliers to submit more credit.
Where MPANs are not estimated at II and data defaulted by MDS, will exception reports be sent to data services?
Yes.
Will defaulting rules be any different than current?
So defaulting, well, yes, they will. But if you've not got any data, then the market-wide data service will allocate the load shape associated with the MPAN in the expectation that at a later time it will receive either the actual data or some estimates from the data service.
Is there any scope for new GSP GCFs to go live before transition, particularly if MHHS is delayed and muted export dramatically increases?
That's not on our radar at the moment. I think it's unlikely that if we're building a new system, when that new system goes live, the new calculation will go live. It would be problematic to introduce the new GCF calculation into the existing volume allocation agent processes.
Great. We've got a question here about will the questions asked in advance of the session be considered in the advanced session this afternoon? The advanced questions are MHHS advanced. If you want to submit a question for that session there.
Yeah, there were a whole load of questions submitted in advance of this settlement session, but when I read through them, they did appear to relate more to the advanced segment, like what do you set the estimation flag to if if a metering system fails a proving test? That's clearly an advanced question and not really covered by this session.
Yeah, so MHHS advanced on Slido as well. That's open if you want to submit questions there.
So Amity, who's covering off that session this afternoon from your side? Because you might want to pass those questions across.
Yes, I will do. That'll be Kevin, but I'll flag that to him.
Okay.
We've then got Alex REP MHHS IF 165 is shown as internal, yet goes to ESO, not Elexon.
That's probably my fault. If you look at that, that is actually a P flow. The mechanism for that is yet to be decided as well. How the ESO actually wants to receive that report is also currently up for debate.
Okay, and I guess on that it says there is a P flow being sent to suppliers. Why is this being treated as an internal flow? Is that the same?
Yeah, let me just have a look at that. What is that one? I'll take that away. That shouldn't, yeah. If that's not currently received by suppliers on the P48, I'll just check that out. I'm not sure whether that is actually the data going to, whether that shouldn't say suppliers, whether that should say BSCCO. I think earlier on we said that they need the group correction factors for publishing on the portal or whatever mechanism they're going to use. So that might be a mistake. I'll check that out.
Great. And then it says, has there been any analysis on the settlement risk impact of moving to 4 months for RF? 14 months allows for MPAS updates, disputed reads, etc.
Yeah, I mean, the change to settlement timetable has been widely debated, both by the design working group, the code change development group in conjunction with Ofgem. Ofgem were very keen that it should be as short as possible so that parties can close their books earlier. And there have been various challenges across that. There were a number of different scenarios looked at, some with very long tails, and we also looked at like what happens internationally before we settled on the 4 months. And some of the rationale behind the 4 months is if you've got a monthly read cycle, that gives you 4 attempts to get that, you know, say for trad meters. Clearly things could happen after that, but there will be a disputes process to allow for correction after the 4 month period.
The IF 016 is the DIP replay. Would this data come direct from the DIP or from MDS? MDS is not in the routing, but I'm surprised that the DIP holds any data.
Do you want me to answer that, Kevin?
Yeah, go on.
It's Paul Pettit. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the replay information will be held by the DIP, and I think it could be up to 2 years. But if you look at the interface specification, there is a note that is still under discussion and will fall out, or the information will actually come out as part of the detailed design, and depending obviously on the service provider award of contract. But yeah, it's not, I don't believe it's coming from MDS. It will be held in the DIP.
Thanks, Paul.
And then the final one we've got is, will the ISD entities document clearly outline where data items are being replaced?
Now, it's probably an oversight on my part. There, you can see what the new structure is for the amended flows in there. But if you want to know which entities are staying and which entities are going, there is another document on ISD, which I will just, if I just escape this, I can tell you what that document is. There's a document called EM021, which is the ISD entity map, version 3.0. And that is the document which shows which MDD entities are being frozen and kept for 5 years, which ones are being kept. So there's like a Moscow, you know, must have, won't have in that document. Was that everything, Amity?
Yes, that's the last question.
Okay, well, that timing went quite well then, which that just leaves me to say thank you very much for attending today. We will be publishing both the slides and those questions and responses. and I just wish everybody has a nice bank holiday weekend, and might see some of you again on the advanced deep dive, which is taking place this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Kevin. Cheers.